took over this role in 2018, and you've made lots of changes. Among them, prioritizing prosecuting violent crime at a time when violent crime across the country is up in the wake of a pandemic. His cite and release policy has received praise from progressives for keeping 6,200 people out of jail for low-level crimes. At the same time, those of us covering politics know that crime is on the minds of lots of voters headed into this election season, and we hear that from neighborhood associations, we hear it from the business community, we certainly hear it from Republican Mark LaHood, who I think is here somewhere also. Yeah. Who believes that the next person in this role needs to be tough on crime. So with that in mind, let's jump right in. We are going to start by asking each candidate to give a 3-minute introduction statement, and then we have a series of questions for both of them. They will get some time to respond if they are attacked in their opponent's response. And then you might get a response from the moderator too. You might get a follow-up question if you don't answer the question, or if we feel like some more context is needed. So let's kick it to you first, District Attorney Joe Gonzalez. You want to give us an intro in no more than 3 minutes? Your time starts now.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank the San Antonio Report for putting this forum together. And I want to thank all of our audience members for coming out tonight and listening to the very important race that is the District Attorney's Office. And I also want to thank our virtual viewers, those that are watching us via live stream. Let me first say that I believe that there are two themes that are overriding this or central to this race. One of those is the philosophical approach that we each would take and experience. Let me first start with philosophy. When I was first elected district attorney back in January 2019, I walked into the office and encountered boxes and boxes and stacks of files that needed to have work done on them. So we immediately rolled up our sleeves. We realized that we handle 60,000 cases a year. So we had to make some tough decisions. And some of those decisions involved focusing on what's important to this community, and that is keeping our community safe, focusing on public safety. And so we did that. We focused on domestic violence. We did things to change the structure of that division. We pulled out that unit that was previously under another division, made it its own standalone unit. We increased the number of prosecutors from 23 to 46. And we improved the intake of that division. In addition to that, we focused on other areas of how we handle violent crime. But we could not effectively handle any of those cases if we didn't make some tough decisions out of how to handle the low-level nonviolent offenses. That's where our criminal justice reform measures came in. We have robust reform policies that deal with the low-level nonviolent offenses, one of which I'm particularly proud of that you've already mentioned, cite and release. It is a law enforcement tool. The only reason it works is because law enforcement has the absolute discretion to make the decision to cite that individual instead of arresting them, which saves the officer time, allows him to get back on patrol and investigate those more serious crimes. In addition to that, I believe that experience is tantamount to this job. You know, I was wearing my Dallas Cowboy shirt early this morning, and I realized, imagine if I walked into the middle of Texas Stadium and into the huddle and said, okay, guys, today I'm going to be your quarterback. Can you imagine the response I would get by those members of that team? And that's just a game, right? That's not real life. That's not this office that makes life and death decisions. Here, in order to lead an office of 500 people, you have to have some experience. I'm the only candidate, I'm the only person on this stage that has had prior experience as a prosecutor. I've been in practice for 34 years. I've always done criminal law. I haven't engaged in any family law or personal injury or anything of that nature.
You're at your 3 minutes.
And so I'd like to continue doing my job as prosecutor.
Mr. LaHood. Can you give us an opening statement in 3 minutes or less, starting now?
Thank you. Well, good evening. My name is Mark LaHood. I am running for Bexar County District Attorney. So, shortly, first and foremost is I'm running for DA because the policies, the ideology, and the actual execution, the lack of leadership, has made our community unsafe. In the last 3 years, we don't need to hear from the media. We know that crime is on the rise. We know that criminals aren't being held accountable. We know it. We feel it. So, first and foremost, I'm running for 2 reasons. One is very personal, one is professional. I'm married and I'm a father of 4. I have a 15-year-old, a 4-year-old, 2-year-old, and a 10-month-old. And the reality is this, is I'm past my middle point. I have less time alive than I do here. And I can't always be there to clean up the mess, to fix it, to protect it. And I think back when I look at my daughter and I ask, what can we do to protect our community? What can we do to protect our children? Right? Because the reality is that what we're dealing with, sorry, one second. It's bad right there. Sorry about that. Our children, how much time do I have left?
1 minute and 18 seconds.
Thank you, I apologize. So, we have to focus on protecting our families. As a criminal defense attorney, I've done that for 15 years. The reality is this: not guilties, dismissals, and weak pleas are good for business, but they're not good for our communities. On day one, this office took actions that hurt our communities, that hurt our families, that hurt the safety of what we hold dear, our home. And so my approach is simple: ideological and execution. Ideologically is this: we have to work with and support law enforcement to get back on prosecuting. Our campaign is endorsed by Deputy Sheriff Association of Bexar County, San Antonio Police Officer Association, and CLEAT, which is the Combined Law Enforcement Association of Texas. We have to enforce the law, not because of politics. Politics doesn't belong in the DA's office or law enforcement. We have legislatures to create the laws. We have to enforce the laws that are on the books, and we have to get back to the business of doing what's right, which is getting justice for our victims, holding people accountable, because the reality is this: the rules of relationships don't...
That is 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. We'll keep talking about it. Thank you.
Angie, may I have a chance to respond since it was direct criticism of my office?
Yeah, you can have 1 minute.
Okay, real quick. I mean, it's admirable that he wants to do this job, but it's not enough to have the desire. You have to have the experience.
Sorry, it's meant to be 1 minute to defend yourself.
All right, well, that's what I'm doing. I'm responding to his attack that being a criminal defense lawyer is about protecting the family. That's not what a criminal defense lawyer does. I did it for 20 years versus his 15 years. What a prosecutor does is represent victims of crime. That's what it takes to do this job, and I'm the only one that has experience doing that.
Okay. We are going to move into our first question of the night, which is for both candidates. Particularly in San Antonio's downtown, where both locals and tourists feel the impact of the district attorney's policies, how do you balance prioritizing the need to address violent crime with the public's need to feel safe from lower level crimes like trespassing and low level theft? And this will go first to Mr. LaHood. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, the first approach is this, is what ideology do we have, right? I'm sure most of us have heard of the broken windows theory, which is if we don't address low-level offenses, it only escalates. And so what I was going to say earlier applies to this, right? The rules that apply to our children apply to all of us. Actions have consequences, and if we don't have consequences, our behavior doesn't get better, it gets worse. If we take away accountability, our behavior doesn't get better, it gets worse. And so the sad thing is this, right? There is violent crime, but we forget the complete circle, right? Because often these low-level crimes, whether it's drug addiction from heroin, fentanyl, crack cocaine, meth, cocaine, whether it's trespassing, whether it's mental health illnesses, these things destroy the fabric of, we're talking about downtown, right? The businesses that is the heart and center of our community, right? Tourism. What happens when tourists no longer feel safe? Our businesses vacate. As our businesses vacate, poverty increases. If poverty increases, crime increases. Now we have a circular argument that comes back to square one. We can't pick and choose. We have to apply the law evenly. We have to take it not on an umbrella approach. We have to take it on a really simple, objective approach. You look at the charge, you look at the facts, and you look at the history. And if we do that, we can prioritize which cases we have to handle and address first, and which ones follow second and third, because we only have a little amount of time. And we want to make sure that we're efficient, effective, in holding people accountable.
Mr. Gonzalez?
So that is a lofty approach to what should be done. The problem is he's never done that. He's chosen to decide to take his career path in a different direction. I began as a prosecutor. I've done this job. I've been in every division in the office, short of the appellate section. But the reality is we cannot effectively cover every crime that is filed and do a good job. We have to prioritize the kind of cases that we handle. The theft and the criminal trespass cases you're referring to deal with the homeless. The homeless population is a societal problem. You cannot criminalize that away. The sheriff has said that. By the way, when he's talking about endorsement, I enjoy the endorsement of the Bexar County Sheriff because he understands what's important about keeping our community safe. And when members of the homeless commit real crimes, that is, they threaten people, they use weapons, we have prosecuted them. And since October of 2020, we have accepted 2,300 cases, or 93% of those cases. But I'm not going to throw somebody in jail because they're sleeping on a park bench. 2 people died at the beginning of my administration. That is the reason that we created the criminal trespass policy. Yes, we have to do our job. Yes, we have to be concerned with public safety, but we have to be humanitarian about it as well.
Thank you. Okay, I have some follow-ups for both of you on this question. Mr. LaHood, there was a time not that long ago in this country where both parties agreed that tough on crime policies were locking up a lot of people, they weren't that effective, and they were costing a lot of money. How do you plan to accomplish this without exceeding jail capacity?
Well, simple, because we're not going to have an agenda, right? So tough on crime means that your only solution, your first solution, your primary solution is incarceration. The reality is incarceration isn't a bad word, but it shouldn't be your only solution or your first choice. Rehabilitation and treatment isn't a bad word, but it shouldn't be your first choice. Because if you apply a blanket brush, we're going to get it wrong. And if we get it wrong, we're not doing justice, right? We're here, because we forget, we're talking about real lives, right? These aren't numbers. These are people whose lives have been affected. These are people accused of something. And when we forget that, we ignore why we're here, right? Anyone in this room that knows what it's like to have been violated, hurt, left behind, forgotten, discarded because you didn't fit a mold, knows what it's like to have your story painted off because it didn't fit the agenda. So to answer your question is this, sorry about that, is you have to go back to what I said. Get rid of all the sound bites that we like.
That's a minute. Sorry.
Just very briefly, just more story. The charge, the facts, and the history. That's it. Thank you.
And Mr. Gonzalez, I wanted to follow up on your answer as well. At a community budget meeting a couple of weeks ago, Police Chief William McManus was asked about an increase in property crime from constituents, and he put the blame right back on you. He said, I'm going to read it to you. Crimes like trespassing and criminal mischief are simply not prosecuted, and they certainly don't spend any time in jail. Since you were not at that meeting, how do you respond to that?
Well, that's an unfortunate statement that was made because, as I mentioned to you, we do prosecute. We have prosecuted property crimes. We do a robust job of prosecuting crimes when those cases are filed in our office. But the reality is we're not an initiating agency. We have to wait for law enforcement to investigate that case and bring it to us. We spend a lot of time working with law enforcement. We have a good relationship with them for example, the cite and release, we worked with them at the very beginning to create that program. We meet with them on a regular basis. We've met with Chief McManus and Sheriff Salazar and other patrol division leaders and command staff in order to help them improve the way they patrol our streets. So it is a collaboration, it is a work in progress, but I believe we do a good job at keeping our community safe.
And just to be clear, you're saying that he's not making the arrests, or you would prosecute him if the arrests were made?
Well, no, to be clear, when arrests are made, we will review it, make a probable cause decision, and accept those cases. But we don't have any control over the arrests or the decision to arrest that are made on the field. With regard to the bonds, he understands how it works, and it's a misunderstanding in the community that we recommend bonds, but the magistrate judges are the ones that actually set the bonds.
Thank you. Sorry for running over on the time on that. I just think this is one of the big questions that we are all probably here to hear the answer to. Moving on to the next question. Data shows that higher incarceration rates for people of color can impact families and children of the incarcerated in ways that perpetuate cycles of poverty and criminal behavior. Are you concerned that the criminal justice system operates in a way that can end up making some communities less safe? And Mr. Gonzalez, first to you.
Well, I don't think there's been any connection that having a fair and equitable criminal justice system makes a community less safe. What we do know is that people of color, people of less means, people that cannot afford bonds are treated differently than people that have means. There was a situation this week where someone was arrested for a terroristic threat. That violent individual should not have the ability to bond out. He's got the potential to walk out the front door because he's got enough money to bond out. That shouldn't happen. We should be focusing our decisions to release people based on the risk in the community, not the ability, not the amount of money that they have in their bank account.
Mr. LaHood, would you like to hear the question again?
No, I think I know the question. Thank you very much. Look, the reality is this. The DA's office is the chief law enforcement officer in the county. The buck stops here, right? And the reality is this. The leadership or lack thereof dictates the policy in the office. And so if people are being discriminated, whether it's because of economics or color or creed, that is controlled in the DA's office. Again, if we take out those sound bites and we focus on what we're dealing with as people, right? Because we can't forget that. We can't stop, when we talk about anything, don't say color, say a person, right? Say a man or a woman, a father or son. We're dealing with people. If we have the leadership to not be afraid of how we're going to look in the public and just focus on what our job is to seek justice. Hold people accountable under the law, make it whole for those who have been violated, and if we have the integrity to tell our prosecutors, don't take advantage of a weak defense attorney. Don't take advantage because you know someone doesn't have the means of defense. If the facts are there or not, to do what's right or wrong. And that means both. Don't be afraid to have the hammer if it needs, and don't be afraid to let it go if it needs to. That's where it resides. It comes from the DA's office, and we need a DA that has the courage and integrity to do what's right regardless of what the public opinion thinks.
Would you like a minute to respond to that? 1 minute. We're going to give Mr. Gonzalez 1 minute to respond to that.
It was easy for police unions not to endorse me because I told them from the very beginning that I wasn't going to seek their endorsements and I wasn't going to take any contributions because I believe it's a conflict of interest to do that when we have officers. Part of what we do is we hold everyone accountable, including members of law enforcement when they engage in misconduct. We did that this month when we prosecuted the constable that is yet to be sentenced. No one should be a bully with a gun and a badge, including members of this law enforcement community, and that's why we didn't, nor did we seek the endorsements from the police unions.
Okay. You have brought me right to our next question. Recognizing that the district attorney's office is just one piece of the criminal justice system, we would like to talk about your relationship with law enforcement. Mr. LaHood, tell us how you would plan to work with law enforcement in this job.
Okay. So first and foremost, let's use common sense, right? So the way it works is our police officers are the investigatory agencies, right? So they're the ones that research, investigate, and build up the evidence. They take that packet and they hand it to the DA. And with that, the DA then has the evidence to prosecute. They're two sides of the same coin. They're the same animal, right? We have to work together. The example that I say is that the Toyota plant, right? There's two things. There's supply chain and then the manufacturing. If we're not making Toyota trucks, it's either the plant itself or the supply chain. Well, our police officers are making the arrest, but the cases are being rejected from the DAs. The cases are being dismissed. They're not working together. They're not equally yoked. And with that, we're not able to be a well-oiled justice machine. And so what we have to do is be willing to work together. But let's use common sense, right? My children, I appreciate and protect them unconditionally. But when they mess up, guess what? Depending on what it is, they might get popped, they might get grounded. There is always accountability. Accountability isn't a word we apply to this. It applies to law enforcement, DAs, judges, everyone. We have to hold everyone accountable. If we stop holding blinders, then we don't have to pick and choose when we selectively enforce justice. Because we have to get back on track on what we're here for, and that's with working with the police. And so we've already started that. We will continue to do that. And to do that, we will get our homes back on track.
Mr. Gonzalez, how does your office work with law enforcement?
We, from the very beginning, have worked with law enforcement to try and improve the training and the quality of the work that they do and the quality of the cases that they bring to our office. We continually meet with them. One of our division chiefs is here in our intake division. She regularly will meet with them about the quality of work that they put together to file in our office. We have other division chiefs that meet with them on a regular basis. We have quarterly meetings. We meet with every police chief in the Alamo area to talk about the issues that are important to them. So we are collaborating with them. In addition to that, as I mentioned, I have regular meetings with Chief Salazar and regular meetings with Chief McManus. Sheriff Salazar and Chief McManus. So we have an open line of communication. We are working with them to try and improve the way that we collaborate together, all with the idea of keeping our community as safe as we can.
I want to follow up on both of these. Mr. LaHood, in a candidate forum last weekend, Mr. Gonzalez said that law enforcement has endorsed you because they're afraid of him holding them accountable. He said, they have an issue with the fact that I've gone to the grand jury and indicted several officers for excessive use of force. So my question to you is, what is the role of the DA's office in holding law enforcement accountable? Well,
there's two questions to that. Could I answer them both?
Sure.
All right. So first and foremost, let's use common sense. The endorsement has nothing to do with the DA indicting police officers that have violated law. DAs throughout the history have done what they're supposed to do. We don't get a pat on the back for doing that. And law enforcement has always endorsed DAs that did their job well. So let's be clear that the endorsement has to do with the fact that there's not a relationship, there's a lack of prosecution, there's a dysfunction in the office. The second part of that question is this. I keep saying it over and over again, is accountability. That's it. We have to have communication and accountability. The relationships that apply to our children, apply to our wives, apply to our bosses, it doesn't change because we're in politics. It's all the same. We have to have an open line of communication. We have to have the courage to tell the bad news and hear the criticism and be proactive in the changes. And that's what the difference is. I don't surround myself with yes men. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And for Mr. Gonzalez, given the comments earlier from Police Chief William McManus, do you feel like there's room to improve your relationship with law enforcement? I hear you saying that y'all work together all the time and meet constantly.
He clearly, obviously doesn't agree with all the policies that we have, but that's okay. We can agree to disagree. I have a brother who was a member of law enforcement. He's still with law enforcement. So I've heard all the stories. I know that what's important to members, to officers in blue and their families, is that the officer come home at night after the shift. We are mindful of that, but it is important that we work together. And what he just said sounds good, but it's not true. historically, district attorney's office have not actively prosecuted members of law enforcement that engage in misconduct. I'm the first DA in Bexar County that created a civil rights division because it was long overdue. And that's why they said...
Thank you. This next question is a two-parter. Given the national conversation surrounding abortion in the recent months, can you tell us your personal opinion on Texas's abortion laws, as well as how your office would handle a case involving a violation of an abortion law if it landed on your desk as district attorney? Starting with Mr. Gonzalez.
You know, when I was in law school, I learned that one of the most well-settled laws was Roe v. Wade. It was a well-settled law for now almost 50 years until it was recently overturned by the Dobbs decision. But I took an oath to become district attorney to follow the Constitution. But that oath says that my job is not to prosecute, but to seek justice. I do not see the justice in prosecuting women for personal choice decisions like abortion. Now, let me be clear. I know my obligation. I know the oath to the citizens of Bexar County. I will review any case that is brought to us from law enforcement. But again, I don't see the justice in spending resources and time and effort to prosecute women who make personal choice decisions or the medical providers that assist those women in making those decisions.
Okay, that last part confused me. That last part confused me, so no?
No, what?
No, you won't prosecute
No,
abortions?
what I said was I will review those cases when and if they're filed in the office, and then I'll make a decision. I will exercise prosecutorial discretion to decide whether or not to prosecute those cases.
Okay, so not
you
never?
might.
What's that?
Not never?
So you might, so you
No,
might
well,
prosecute.
There are. I'll tell you what. I've got some time left. I would tell you I can envision cases where I may decide to prosecute a provider or someone that, for example, forces a teenager to undergo an abortion, and if it's something like that, then sure, I'd be open-minded enough to decide to do that. But just as a matter of course, I don't see the justice do that. Well, I've been elected. I have been elected to protect the safety of the community, and I have the right to exercise prosecutorial discretion, and the voters in the community will decide in November whether or not I'm heading in the right direction.
Okay, Mr. LaHood, same question.
Okay. So a couple things. First and foremost, I think we talked about it, right? This is a political question. It does not belong in the purview of the DA's office. That's a fact. We have legislatures that create the laws, and if we don't like the laws, then we go to our legislatures, we get our friends, our neighbors, and we change the law. Because we forget that we have a system in place of how laws are created. When we think, I thought it was insane when KSAC called and asked, what are your opinions? Are you going to enforce the law? And I said, 30 years ago, could you imagine media calling law enforcement, are you going to enforce the law? 30 years ago, you would have called your state reps, your senators, and said, damn it, change the law. Not your police officers, because we don't want our law enforcement to pick and choose on their personal belief what is there and what is not, what is lawful and what is illegal. We have a system in place. And we heard two sides of a story, right? I took an oath to uphold the law, but I disagree with that, and we forget, right? In 2 years, 4 years, or 6 years, someone else is going to be over here. And when we say that you can pick and choose what you enforce, we're telling anybody that's in that office they can pick and choose what they enforce. And then when we say that, we forget. When we open that door, you're telling anybody they can enforce laws that aren't in the books because they think it's right. And that's illegal. That's not justice. And that is not this job. I will, on a case by case, I don't have a blanket answer. Here's the truth. I don't have to lie and quibble. My answer is this. The law is clear, and every case is based upon the charge, the evidence, and the history. There is no blanket response one way or the other than to follow the law and do your oath.
I don't think either of you answered both parts of that question. I think a lot of people in this room would still like to know the answer to whether either of you personally agree or disagree that abortion should be legal in Texas as it was just less than a year ago.
Then the answer is abortion should be legal in Texas. And by the way, let me just correct something that's absurd. He said abortions are not the purview of the district attorney's office. The statute makes it criminal. It makes it a first-degree offense, and someone can go to prison for life. How is that not the purview of the district attorney's office? That's exactly what the prosecutor's office decides, is whether or not to prosecute those kinds of cases.
First and foremost, first and foremost is this. I promise you one thing. My personal beliefs, my moral beliefs, my political beliefs, anything that's outside of the statute and the law will not be relevant in the DA's office. Now, I'll tell you this. I am Catholic, and I am taught, and my church teaches that abortion is murder. But I'm not here to legislate from the DA's office. I'm not here to legislate morality. I'm here to enforce the law, and that's what we have to focus on.
Following up on this briefly, Mr. Gonzalez in Florida, Ron DeSantis recently suspended a state attorney who pledged not to prosecute abortion-related crimes. Do you see a world in which the state of Texas could force your hand on this issue, and how would you handle that?
First, let me just say I think it's outrageous that a governor from another state would come in here and actually transport individuals under fraud and deceit to misrepresent that they. I'm sorry, audience members disagree with my opinion, but you're asking me what my position is, and the issue that would be before me. The issue that would be before me is whether or not that conduct rises to the level of a crime. We have a human trafficking statute.
Sorry, I think we went off course somewhere here in this question. I was talking about the governor of Florida suspending a state attorney who pledged not to prosecute abortion-related crimes. And do you think that Texas could force your hand on this issue?
Oh, I see. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, look, we've got a removal statute in Texas, and they certainly could consider doing something if moving forward if I took the position that I would absolutely refuse to prosecute abortion cases. But as I've said in the past and will continue to say, I understand my oath. I will exercise my prosecutorial discretion and make that decision when I have to make it when that case is filed in my office.
Okay. And Mr. LaHood, I know that you've said that you will enforce the law regardless of your personal opinion, but here in Texas, there is no exception for rape or incest. So how would you handle a case like that came across your desk?
The same response, which is you take the charge, and I know it's not a broken record, but you take the charge, you look at the facts or the lack thereof, the evidence, you look at the history. Because here's the problem, right? We can manipulate sound bites. Let me give you an example. A shoots B. Right? A shoots B is I get an argument with somebody, I walk home, go back to my car, get a gun, shoot the person. It's probably homicide. A shoots B. A shoots B. B lunges at me with a knife. I shoot him in self-defense. Probably justifiable self-defense. A shoots B. B is stomping on an elderly woman's head on the curb. I shoot, defense third person. There is no such thing as a blanket approach. It always has to be the facts. It has to be the history. It has to be the totality of it. That's how we do our job. That's how we don't just mail it in. That's how we ensure that we are going to get the right person, we don't get it wrong, and on top of that, that's how we protect those, all of us, each and every one of us, whether we agree or not, how we get justice for all of us. And that's what we have to do. The answer to your question is that we have to look at, there is no blanket response. It's the charge, the actual specific facts of the case, and the history of the people involved. That's it. That's it.
I'm still a little unclear on how you would handle a case of rape or incest, but...
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I'm still a little unclear on how you would handle prosecuting a case involving a woman who was seeking abortion because of rape or incest. If you wanted to give that one more try.
Okay. Well, so you would take the facts of the case and you would say, well, what happened? Because you're assuming that you're making an assumption. And in law, you don't make an assumption. When you make an assumption, you get it wrong. So you have to have the evidence to prove that rape or incest occurred. Then you're still looking at how far along they are in the abortion, right? This is the kind of stuff that we were avoiding earlier. There is no cookie cutter answer. It is literally, you have to give a specific fact pattern because that's what we're dealing with. I'm not going to say, well, because rape or incest, there's now an exception or there's not an exception. It has to be a fact by fact, case by case. And then on top of that, you have to deal with the pragmatics of the fact that our office is underwater 15 or 20,000 cases. And so now we have to balance that with now seeking justice on cases that are about to be dismissed, murderers, capital murder suspects, child sex rapists. There's a real world pragmatic balance that we don't want to address because it doesn't fit our narrative, but that's the reality of it.
That's the minute. So I think what you're saying is that you would need to prove that happened?
To prove what?
You'd have to prove that either of those things happened?
Well, yeah, those are necessary elements of the thing you're talking about, right?
Okay. This next question for you both. What is your stance on crimes committed by undocumented immigrants? Do you believe that people who are undocumented and commit low-level offenses should be subject to immigration detention or deportation on top of whatever punishment is appropriate for the crime that they committed? We'll start with Mr. LaHood.
Doesn't matter what you put in front of breaking the law. It doesn't matter. If someone breaks the law, you enforce the law. Period. That's it. That's it. That's the answer. It's not rocket science. This is law enforcement. We don't pick and choose when we do it. It's that simple. It's literally that simple. That's my answer.
I'm going to follow up on that. We're talking about double dipping. Should they be prosecuted for the crime they committed on top of immigration detention or deportation?
Well, immigration is outside of the purview of the DA's office. And so I understand that it's coming normal for our elected law enforcement DAs and officials to go outside of the realm of what their power is. But I believe in the rule of law. I believe that you're constrained by the rules of your state, the Constitution, and the code. And so the second part isn't part of it. The first part is violations of law within the county are going to be enforced by anyone against anyone. Because I'm not going to pick and choose, I agree with your politics, so I'm going to protect you. I disagree with your politics, I'm not going to protect you. Right? Our police officers, when gunshots go off, they run into that room. They don't say, are you a Democrat, are you a Republican, do you agree with me, do you not? They go in there to protect them all. And justice for all or justice for none. It's really that simple.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Well, I would agree with him if he was consistent on his stance that breaking the law is breaking the law, whether or not you're an immigrant or not. But the problem is he's not, because here's a flyer from his primary, and the flyer says, I will work to crack down on illegal immigration and the crime that comes with it. So which is it? Do you take immigration into consideration or do you not?
And the crime that comes with it.
Well, again, our office is responsible. Our office is responsible for prosecuting cases where law enforcement files in our office, and we make decisions every day, all day long, about whether or not a crime occurs, regardless of their citizenship status. Has nothing to do with immigration. Doesn't have anything to do with cracking down on immigration.
Yeah, I am also a little confused about the campaign advertisement. You said just a second ago, immigration is outside of the role of the DA. Your campaign website says that you will crack down on illegal immigration and the crime that comes with it. Can you square those two things?
Yeah, it's real simple. It's kind of like the question you just asked where you said, what are your personal beliefs? In the primary, we are also judging two things. One, the policies that they're going to enforce in person, but you're also trying to find out what their values are, right? Whether it's capital murder, whether it's enforcing crime, whether it's abortion, whatever it is. And so you're conflating two issues. One has to do with a personal opinion that's outside of the purview of the job. The other is a practical consequence that is tied and related to it. The reality is this. I don't think it's illogical to say that if someone comes to your home, One, first of all, I lock my doors and I don't know if y'all do. And if someone comes to my house that I don't know, who are you? What are you here? What are your intentions? Right? I don't think that's illogical to be concerned about those things. Does that make sense?
Well, this reads a little bit more like a campaign promise than a value statement that you are going to work with law enforcement to crack down on illegal immigration.
I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. I mean, I just answered it.
I'm just asking whether this is a value statement or a campaign promise. How are you going to make good on that if that's not a role of the DA?
I've just told you it's not. That is a value, or it's a personal value opinion. The second part is the campaign statement, which is I'm going to crack down on crime as a result of illegal immigration. That's a fact.
Okay. All right. I'll take a breath after that one. We would like to talk a little about campaign finance. Mr. Gonzalez, it was well publicized in 2018 that you received $1 million from a George Soros-linked political action committee. Mr. LaHood, you've received numerous donations from criminal defense attorneys. One of them's even funding some billboards with your name on them. So I would like to ask you each how you plan to keep outside interests from influencing your decisions as district attorney.
Who starts?
That one goes to you first, Mr. Gonzalez.
All right, well, let me tell you. So that is a constant theme that has permeated my entire administration. That group that George Soros belongs to is just one of he's a small percentage of a larger national organization that believes in criminal justice reform. They happen to endorse my views and my philosophy, and that's why they supported me 5 years ago. But they have never called me. They have never said, look, we supported you. We want you to do X, Y, Z. We make decisions on our own. Those division chiefs you see sitting here and I meet on a regular basis, no one has any outside influence on how we prosecute our cases.
I'm being told that we now need to ask the audience to quiet down a little bit for the live stream. Sorry. Over to you, Mr. LaHood.
I guess I would be a little confused because there's two separate issues, right? One is campaign finance, which we get because you have to have money to fund your campaign. The second would be donating to organizations. And so I guess my question would be, one of the things you want to prevent is, for instance, TOP, Texas Organizing Project. I'm sure we're aware of it. Coming here, working with the DA's office and releasing repeat violent criminals that come back on our street and commit crimes. They've donated heavily. He's donated to them. And so the first approach to that, I would say, is this, is that what we have to do is focus on what the job is at hand, right? And how we apply that. Are we consistent with how we apply it? So does someone donating mean that you're now going to change your actions? If you're insecure enough to believe that you can be swayed by that, then I guess it's an issue. But if you know what you're saying, if you don't waffle on your answers, if you don't make campaign promises to not seek the death penalty or not prosecute prostitution and then come back and enforce it, if you're consistent, if your message is the law is the law, I'm not here for a Republican or Democrat or private agenda. I'm here to enforce the law and seek justice. Everything else goes to the side because at the end of the day, it's what we're here for and what we seek on whether or not we're true to our mission or not, in my humble opinion.
Do I have a chance to respond to this?
Yeah, and since you're going to have a second to respond, I think I would like to add there, this is one of the big curiosities about this race, that $1 million. So maybe it would help us if you could give us some examples of where you've done things that are outside of, where you've broken with that group.
Where I've broken with that group? Mm-hmm. Well, there was never a relationship where they had any influence. They contributed to my campaign just like anybody here that has contributed locally. Over 90% of the contributions that I've received have been from members of this community, from the law enforcement, from lawyers and other groups. And so the point is they have no influence. They have never had any influence. If they decide to continue to support me, they know it comes with no strings attached. But what's more important is that the allegation he's made is untrue. He made a comment that I work with TOP to release criminals. TOP is a very important organization that is working for the fair and just the equitable prosecution of all people, especially people of color. And if they make the decisions to decide to bond somebody, that's their decision. But I didn't have anything to do with that, and it's unfair and it's untrue for him to make that allegation. And by the way, he mentioned the death penalty. I did something that I felt like I had to do. I guess he's forgotten about Otis McCain, the fact that we sought and obtained the death penalty under my watch and under my administration, because I have continued to say that I'm going to reserve it for the worst of the worst, and we did what had to be done in that case.
Helpful context. For the final question of the night, each candidate is going to get a special individual question. We'll start with you, Mr. LaHood. You said in a recent candidate forum that we have to not be afraid to do what's right regardless of whether it's popular. Can you give us an example of something that you plan to do that is going to be unpopular and tell us with whom it might be unpopular?
Man, that's asking for hypotheticals. Let's talk about if someone is murdered and we think that someone committed the crime, right? If they're already prosecuted in the court of public opinion, or if we believe that someone should be prosecuted or not be prosecuted. You know, the reality is this, is that as a criminal defense attorney, I know this, that we make our minds up, the media makes our minds up, all of us do. It's human nature. I do also. It's human. But what the DA has to do is, regardless, whether it's the Republican Party, Democratic Party, whether it's a donor, whether it's someone that endorses you, whatever it is, the media, you ignore what it is that they want you to do if it goes outside of the charge, the evidence, and the history. If the facts are there to prosecute, you go forward with it. If the facts are there to dismiss it, then you have the courage to dismiss it. Right? There are cases languishing for years right now that are in limbo because it would be unpopular to make a decision. That's not fair. That's not justice. I can promise you this. You may not agree with everything that I say, but I promise you, if you ask why the office did it, we're going to be able to tell you the reasons one way or the other. We're always going to be able to address it. We will never have a closed door. Because the reality is we need that transparency, true transparency, not the catchword, to be able to say, this is why we did or didn't do it. We're always, this is my campaign promise, always going to seek justice whether we agree on it or not. And if you ask why, we'll be able to show you what the facts or evidence that supported or did not support it. Regardless if it's popular, regardless if it's thought, regardless of anything other than justice.
For the record, I wrote down in my notes that the answer to that question is the people who will be unhappy is the media, is what I heard.
No, but okay. That's one of them.
Mr. Gonzalez, you said in a recent press conference that cite and release allows law enforcement to focus their resources on the really bad criminals, quote, the kind of cases I see all the time that keep us up at night. Given that you are now almost 4 years into this experience at the DA's office, what keeps you up at night?
That's exactly that. The cases involving home invasions, the aggravated robberies, the murders, the capital murders, the gun violence that we see because guns are so accessible, because anybody can go and purchase an assault weapon without any training. You know, you can get an assault weapon at the age of 18, but you can't buy a six-pack of beer. Those are the kind of cases that we see. We see road rage. People are so quick to pull a weapon and point it and shoot it at people. And so that's why we focus on violent crime. That's why we focus on domestic violence, because those are the kind of cases that need our attention. If there are cases that languish, first of all, some of the cases that languish were inherited from his brother. When I walked into the office, 2,000 cases of sexual assault cases that had not been reviewed, had not been touched. It took a whole year to go through those 2,000 cases, some of which had been languishing for years. But we focus on what we need to focus with the amount of people that we have in the office, and we're going to continue to do that because our number one priority is the safety of the community, and I make no apologies for that.
And then just brief response.
Sorry?
Thank you. Safety of the community. I don't think it's safe for the community to go from 2,000 cases to 9,000 cases backlog with an unfiled another 5 or 10,000 cases. That's not safe to the community. That's not addressing it. The reality is this, is that cite and release as a blanket policy, just like we talked about with TOP, doesn't take into effect a person's history, the facts thereof, which is why we see these soft approaches without the actual facts leading to murders, robberies, repeat offenders, committing crimes and crimes against our community, our businesses, and our homes. That is the opposite antithesis of the safety of our community.
Yeah, response to misinformation.
Sir, is that?
I'd like to respond to his misinformation. I don't know where he gets. I mean, it's,
Was that a closing statement?
No,
Or sorry, was that a
to
response?
them.
I don't. Sorry, I was confused about the response there. I'm going to give you 1 minute to respond to that because I don't really think that first one should have had a response. So go ahead for 1 minute, Mr. Gonzalez.
well, the point is, he talks about 9,000 cases. I don't know what he's talking about, but we went through a pandemic, the likes of which we've never seen in this country before. But our people worked around the clock. We inherited a backlog because we didn't have jury trials for almost 2 years, but we went just in the domestic violence misdemeanors, we reduced the backlog from 6,000 to 3,000. So that's something I'm very proud of, and I'm proud of our members of our office that work hard.
Okay. I think that brings us to our closing statements. I understand now. I think you were defending the previous administration. That makes more sense. Let's do a 1 minute closing statement for each. Mr. LaHood, you want to go first?
Thank you very much. Look, this election is about safer streets and safer families. That's it. It blows my mind when we're here arguing about whether or not we're going to enforce the law. Like, in what world do we live in where someone applies for a job interview, and this is a job interview, where we say, hire me, I won't do what you hire me to do. That's what this job interview is about. My promise to all of us, because Bexar County is all of us, the promise to our community is this: to focus on justice. And that is broken down into, quite simply, holding people accountable, enforcing the law, and to make sure that we never forget, like the backlog, 6,000 to 3,000. That's a backlog. That's 6,000 people that are accused of strangling, beating, abusing their spouses, and that reduction wasn't trials, it was largely dismissals. We can't forget we're dealing with justice and people's lives. Thank you so much.
Mr. Gonzalez, would you give us a closing statement in 1 minute or less?
The bottom line is, this is a job that requires experience. I come to this office already with 8 years experience as a line prosecutor. I have been doing this job for 4 years. How's he going to answer a question when somebody comes to him and says, look, boss, I've got a case here. I don't know whether or not to dismiss it or not. I don't know whether or not to go forward, but I think I've got some defenses. How would you do it? He wouldn't be able to tell him because he's never, ever done this job. I have tried over 100 criminal jury trials as a prosecutor. He's done 0. That's the difference between he and I, is I've actually done the job. I will not need on-the-job training, and he will have a huge learning curve, and that's what the citizens of Bexar County cannot afford.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you both so much for taking the time this evening. Most of all, thank you for all of your participation in this. I'm going to hand it over to our Editor-in-Chief, Lee Munsell.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for being here, both of you. Go ahead and head on backstage. Thank you very much. Give it up for the candidates. Thank you. And our moderator, Andrea Dresch. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. We're the San Antonio Report. We're a nonprofit newsroom based here in San Antonio. We cover local government politics. But we can't do any of this without your help. As a nonprofit, we depend on donations from the community. And so if you enjoy civic engagement events like this, please consider a donation to the San Antonio Report. We also ask you to join us. In 2 weeks, we're going to have City Fest, which is an annual event that we do every year, which will include a county judge debate. So 2 weeks and a day from tonight, we will have a county judge debate in this same space, same time. And so really would love to see you there. We want to thank Centro San Antonio and the Locke Law Group for their sponsorship of this event. We can't do it without them. We can't do it without you. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great night.